Hi, my name is Dan. Welcome to the channel, and this is going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge. Just want to catch you up on the books I've read over the past couple of weeks, but there's really not much in the way of unifying theme to all of this, except for two. And those two are part of a project I am doing, along with many other booktubers, called 24 in 24. This is a banned book project where we try to read 24 banned books in the year 2024. This is being spearheaded by MJ at the channel Reading This Life. Go check her out. There are a lot of channels who have put out some very good videos on books already. I haven't really talked about any yet. I'm sort of splitting it up, trying to read about 2 banned books per month. And in January, at the tail end of the month, I read Animal Farm, which is the first book I read for this project. This is by George Orwell. Chances are, if you're watching BookTube, you've probably already read this. If you went through high school, you've probably already read this. But this book was banned in many places. This was banned in the Soviet Union, obviously, because this book criticizes, sort of is like a fairy tale that emulates the Russian Revolution and then the rise of Stalinist, the Soviet Union. So obviously this was banned in the Soviet Union until the 80s. And then I think, let's see, let me check my notes here. It was also banned in Bay County, Florida in 1987 in a number of schools in that district, and as well as the United Arab Emirates. I couldn't really find why it was banned in Florida, but apparently someone had a bee in their bonnet about this. Maybe it's political nature, but it's so weird that this was banned. United Arab Emirates, they banned it more for the fact that there's talking pigs and drinking, and that was not appropriate for religious reasons. But anyway, so this has been banned in a few places, but essentially this is one big allegory for the Russian Revolution, as I said, and sort of how Stalin had taken power and made things surprisingly similar to how they were before, only with a new leadership. This book is about Mr. Jones, who's a farmer, who is, kind of lazy, not very good at his job, kind of a drunkard, beats his animals, and the animals decide that they're going to revolt. So one day they just had enough, they snap, and they kick all of the humans off of the farm and rename it Animal Farm. And things progress from there, where they try to create their own laws, and everything starts off with very good intentions, like all animals are equal, and then suddenly, over time, the pigs decide to take over slowly. They are the smart animals, which, in the animal kingdom, they are very smart. So they sort of tweak the rules to their advantage, and suddenly there is like a class system where there's the pigs and everyone else. Some animals are created, they say all animals are equal, and then they add, well, some animals are more equal than others. This is a classic book. It's really good. There's not much I can really say that hasn't been said about it already, but I highly recommend checking it out. That's Animal Farm. The other book was a little less lighthearted for me. It's not really a book, it's more of a graphic novel, but it won a Pulitzer. That is the Complete Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This was a tough read. This includes Mouse and Mouse 2, which was created some years later. But it's a graphic novel where it basically talks about Auschwitz and how the Germans treated the Jews during World War II. And this is an autobiographical story about Art Spiegelman's father, who lived through Auschwitz, and we get vignettes about his modern 1980s modern life, where he's interviewing his grandfather to do this comic, and his grandfather's not really seen in a very positive light, but it's very real feeling. Yes, no one's perfect in this by a long shot, but you get to feel for these characters. And then you go back into the story of, like, how they were treated during the time, how they saw the invasion of Poland, and how they survived. It was very powerful, and we get a lot of autobiographical information about Art Spiegelman himself. His mother committed suicide in like the 60s, I think, so long after she had escaped the camps. And it was just highly emotional. It was highly emotional and really affecting. This hit me hard when I was reading this. And this book was banned recently, very recently, over the last couple of years. It was removed from the curriculum by a school in Tennessee, and the reasons for that are swear words, which I'm sure there's not any school in Tennessee that doesn't hear the frequent use of them, so it's really strange. But also for this reason. And let me just do this. These are dots. The book was banned because of some dots. And those dots represent, almost completely accurately represent how nipples were portrayed in a particular scene in the book where the artist, actually no, it was his father who discovered his wife dead in a bathtub. She was in a bathtub naked, and we saw dots. And so that was like, oh, too much nudity. Like, these are nipples. If you are a mammal, you've probably seen them before. If you're a reptile, you probably work for a school board. It was such a powerful story. I got really offended that dots caused this book to be banned, to be honest. Like, they've never... Let me just show you something that you still will find in every school. That is the letter W. The letter W can also be seen as a butt. They don't ban the letter W. It's more butt-like than these dots are nipple-like. And if you include these banned dots, you get something else. Like, this is dumb. It's not like you're getting like this graphically sexualized detail of human anatomy. It's literally like conveying something extremely tragic. I think there's also like some... That light is getting very bright. I think there's some depiction of like male naked rodents as well, briefly, which is like seeing a very skinny ewe. So it's just dumb. They banned books over dots, swear words, and ewes, essentially. I don't know. It's a really good comic. I suggest checking it out if you haven't. I think a lot of people have already, especially during the time that it was initially banned. Like, there were huge sales of Mouse. So check it out if you haven't, but I highly recommend it. Let's see. The other two books that I've read over the past couple of weeks, one I talked about before, that is the Aeronauts Winless by Jim Butcher. This is not a banned book. It's just a fantasy book that was released like 9 years ago. And I felt bad because like the sequel had just come out over the last few months, I think. And I'm like, I don't remember a thing about the original book. So I went back and read the Aeronauts Winless. And then I realized, oh, this was 9 years ago. Of course you don't remember much about it. That was like the lifetime of my son, plus a couple of years. But I went back and read that, and it's really good. It's described often as steampunk, and I don't think that's correct. Not a lot of steam contraptions. So they do exist in this series. I would call it Crystalpunk, if anything. So it's about a world. There's a lot of detail here, so this is going to be like a skimming the surface. But it's about a world that is probably our world in the future, or a world like our world. And it is now covered completely in mist on the surface. And humanity doesn't live on the surface of the world anymore. They live in these tall spires that make up these like giant city towers. And there's no real way to get from spire to spire except through these flying ships, these like flying pirate ships is one way to describe them. Nautical ships made out of wood, but they just fly through the air through the power of magical crystals. On the surface, there's like these horrific creatures that like are kind of like twisted versions of animals you see today. There's like a lot of them are insectile in nature, or have some component to them that are insectile. There's creatures called silk weavers, which are like kind of like centipede spiders that weave these like magical webs that are useful if you can harvest them, but they're very dangerous, very poisonous creatures that need to be hunted if they make their way into the spires from the surface. There's like these giant praying mantis-like things also on the surface. So a lot of monsters in this. And like I said before, this is like Crystalpunk, so there's a lot of magic that's based around crystals, and they grow these like crystals in vats. A lot of things are grown in vats because you don't have access to the surface. So like meat, you don't really hunt animals, you just grow meat in vats, which is delightful. There are a lot of elements to this series that are kind of like horror adjacent, but the writing isn't really... It doesn't really give you a sense of dread like a horror book would. Steampunk is a similar type of genre, but again, the mechanics of the magic and like instead of guns, they do have like powdered weapons, but instead of guns, they have these crystals that like hook on here and shoot basically lasers. It's less steampunk to me than it is something kind of like... this is not going to make sense to most of you, but kind of like Eberron, which is a Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting that has like a lot of magic that's fueled by crystals that like wizards have stuck elementals into, and they just magically power technology instead of what you'd see like in steampunk, which would be like steam powered conveyances, a lot of gears and stuff. This is a lot of like magical crystals. There are these wizard-like people who are called etherealists, who can harness the magical energies that you find in crystals and in like the ether in the air, but they sort of go insane when they do so. So it's like a give and take, which is very interesting. It's a really cool magic system, even if it isn't like hyper detailed of how it works. It's enough to give you like a sense of what's possible. But yeah, it's a book about that, and there's a lot of sky pirating that happens. Don't want to go into the plot, but basically one spire attacks another, and then our heroes go to like investigate what's going on and try to piece together, how this attack happened and what are they planning next. Oh, and there's also talking cats, because why not? And there's like the only alien kind of race or non-human race that's included into the series are basically like cat inspired things that are called warrior-born. They have like cat eyes and fangs, and their strength and speed is just incredible, but they're also second-class citizens. So it's a cool world. I really like it. And the first book was great. It was a really good, swashbuckling adventure in the mists. And then I read the second book, which is called The Olympian Affair, where he tries to go into a little more like political machinations between the spires. I think this book, while it is revisiting a world that's like 9 years old, and he sort of, I think the author sort of fell out of it a little bit because there's such a delay in his writing. It just was the pace felt a little bit off, but it was still like highly enjoyable, and especially the second half of the book is just a rollicking good time, a really really good adventure. So I do recommend both of these books. These were really good. Again, though, the pacing in the second one, I say really good, like the concepts in it are really good, but some things are just tweak me as a little off. but don't let that put you off. It's still a good time. Let's see, what else did I read? I read some graphic novels. I read the Jughead, like Archie Comics Jughead Volume 1, their graphic novel series that was sort of rebooted in 2016. I guess they rebooted all of the Archie characters in 2016, but it didn't really last because of what happened in 2017 when we got the show Riverdale. Like, in 2016, they tried to modernize it, and the characters were really good, and it wasn't quite as, like, apple pie as, say, like, the original Archie comics of the 50s. But then in 2017, the show Riverdale happened, and I think they scrapped this series to go with a more edgy Riverdale, because Archie Comics needs a lot more bodice ripping, I guess. But this was a good volume. They sort of reimagined Jughead as like this Walter Mitty type character. Is that his name? Something Mitty. Where he just gets lost in his imagination, and like there's real world things happening, and he just goes off into dreamland. So you get suddenly he's a pirate, or suddenly he's a superhero. It was fun. I liked it. But yeah, I think they discontinued that 2016 line of Archie Comics for Riverdale, which didn't really do much for me. What else did I read? I think that's mostly it. I read some Conan comics, but I keep talking about Conan, and not much has changed. It's still really good. This was still, I think I read the first 12 issues now, and I loved every one so far. It's nice to see some familiar stories with more connective tissue between the stories. So, like, it feels like these are sequentially happening, which is not how Conan was written at all. Like, the original Conan stories were like, this is him as a king in Apollonia, or Aquilonia, and here's him when he was a pirate, and you're just, like, jumping from adventure to adventure. This is still episodic, but, like, it's like a fake chronology of Conan. And I like it. It's a nice way to read Conan. And lastly, I am reading the first epic collection of the Fantastic Four. Doing a project where I'm trying to read a bunch of the old Marvel comics to give myself context for getting into Marvel Comics. I'll talk about that again later. But I was surprised. Fantastic Four is not a group I particularly like. Never did, anyway. I think a lot of that had to do with Mr. Fantastic, who just comes across as a jerk all the time. And in the early comics, like, everyone is kind of a jerk to some degree. They do not get along at all. And I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I know there's, like, soap opera-esque plot lines that happen down the road with the Fantastic Four, but I guess they were always just constantly bickering. So it's interesting to see. And Ben Grimm just wants to punch everything. He hates life. He'll fight anyone and everyone, including his own family, well, his found family, the Fantastic Four, and they just don't like each other at this moment. So it's interesting to see. And then you get like the characters like the Skrulls in comic number 2, and they played a significant part in Marvel Comics later down the road, but I was not expecting to see them so soon. And then like their idea was repurposed into like Chameleon in the Spider-Man comics not too long afterwards. So it's interesting. I am enjoying it, and I want to continue. But that's it for me. Sorry this was all over the place, but I enjoyed myself, and I encourage you to pick up any of these books. They're all really good. So I will talk to you again later. Thank you.